There's some crazy stats about owner dissatisfaction post-sale. 70 to 80% of owners are dissatisfied post-sale. I'd argue that's not because they sold. It's because they sold to the wrong person in the wrong way.
Welcome back to the Wealth Actually podcast, the show that features experts, entrepreneurs, and commentators that will give you the right knowledge, planning, and guidance so you can preserve your assets and enjoy your wealth. Learn more and subscribe today at wealthactually.com.
This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes. It is neither investment, legal, nor tax advice. It does not represent the opinions of the employers of the host or guest.
Welcome back. I'm Frazer Rice. This episode is great for founders and people who are looking to sell their business. Alex Seydel is with Ripple's Edge Advisors. She advises companies on selling their business and how to bulletproof that business for the sales process. She almost acts like an outsourced board member. It's great stuff, and for those people who are selling their business, it's a really worthwhile listen. Welcome aboard, Alex.
Hi, Frazer. So nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for being on. We're at a time now with the economy it feels like it's roaring. Valuations on things are going up, and people who have founded businesses are exploring their options. And I think that's kind of where you step in with your firm, Ripple's Edge Advisors. And maybe talk to us a little bit about what you do to help founders get ready, and not only in understanding what they have in their own business, but then how to go through kind of the daunting process of exploring their options and then kind of getting their business bulletproofed for when people start looking under the hood.
Absolutely. My background is as an M&A attorney, so I came from the deal side. My co-founder's an operator, so she actually knows how to run the businesses.
Important.
Yes. It's a very good duo. So I think like a buyer first and foremost. That's how I was trained. So how we help business owners now is we jump in and we say 2 to 5 years before exit. And really, we're trying to solve a problem that I think is still being missed by most of the industry. Brokers and bankers know how to, get deals done and create auctions and create demand and sell for high prices. That's all great. I think what the gap I'm seeing and the gap I was seeing before was really jumping in with the owner before that process, getting clear on what's a win for them. And if anybody's seen, there's some crazy stats about owner dissatisfaction post-sale. So business owners that have gone through the sale process, and some of these surveys are 70 to 80% of owners are dissatisfied post-sale. I'd argue that's not because they sold. It's because they sold to the wrong person in the wrong way. So it's the who and the how. I know jumping in with them earlier, before we go to market, before we start talking multiples and financials and all those things, getting with the owner and doing the work on what's a win for them. What do they care about in the process? When they think about their life through this deal and post-deal, what do they want to feel, see? How do they want to operate on an average Tuesday? Yes, after all the cool vacations you're going to go on with all your freedom and all your time and that new, wire at closing. After that, what do you want to be doing? And then when you look back at that beautiful business that you built and then sold, what do you want to see in it? Is it that client service remains the same? Is it that the ethos of the company remains the same? Or is it just, no, Alex, I'm super satisfied with like the biggest wire at closing we can get, and I'll be a happy camper and go on to the next phase of life. But really getting with that owner earlier to get clear on that. So what's a win for them and what's a win for their business? And that's where we start. And then we start implementing and helping them build those exit strategies from there. Because we believe kind of that foundational vision and values work is really going to help bring down, hopefully, that dissatisfaction number. So now we're building an exit that feels right for the owner, right for the business, and helps them feel good about that transaction.
From the let's call it the estate planning and the tax planning side of things, I totally agree with you that the earlier you start, the more tools that you have at your disposal and the better it turns out. Additionally, when I did a piece on sort of pre-exit planning, really sort of engineering what your calendar is going to look like a year after the sale. And I see a lot of dissatisfaction with people who sell, they lose purpose, or they aren't quite equipped to deal with their lower participation in the thing that they built, the baby that they helped give birth to, et cetera. And they, they're unmoored and they just start, and that's part of the depression that they sometimes feel if they haven't really gamed it out and thought out, how do I replace the structure that I had and the drive that it took to build this thing? And it sounds like we're saying the same thing, just from a slightly different angle.
Totally. Absolutely. On your side, right? You're such a critical part of the team when we start this process. Like, one of the first two questions we ask every client we work with is, who's your wealth advisor and who is your, tax strategist, so to say. And hopefully they're already in communication. But if they aren't, you guys are looking at that personal side, right? You're really focused on, what does the family structure look like financially? Some of those tax strategies and planning that we know has to happen. And then obviously, because you're doing this work and not all advisors do this work, is like, let's get really clear on the personal side. I'm coming at it from a little bit of more of the business balance sheet and the business trajectory. And you're coming from that personal side. And I think really, they work well together. And I like to jump in early with those other advisors that are working with these owners to get really clear, because not only, like you said, we know obviously structurally and strategically, there's a bunch of things we need to put in place years in advance, but also that, again, getting really kind of clear on what's a win for them personally and business-wise.
So one of the things you mentioned there is the idea of getting the business ready to be sold. I am fast forwarding to the concept of getting it Sarbanes-Oxley ready in case a public company wants to buy it, and so that it can slot in neatly into the balance sheet. But that's really shorthand to say that things are professionally managed from a bookkeeping perspective, from a process perspective, from a accounts receivable, accounts payable, that's all documented formally, so that the buyer, when they start looking under the hood, they don't start applying discounts to things that they have to fix later. Is that part of what you do?
Absolutely. That's exactly what we do. So, being trained as that lawyer on the buy side, that was my goal, usually at the 11th hour, right? My goal was to advise my client, the buyer, on risk. And then, is the purchase price we offered in this letter of intent actually, what we see now when we come and look under the hood? The best part about my job, and way more fun, is instead of just looking at risk and where we apply discounts, because almost, so many percentage of deals go through a repurchase or a repricing of some kind. We're jumping in with the sellers in those owners, hopefully a year or two in advance at minimum, and seeing like, hey, this is something the buyer's going to see as a risk. This would be something that would prompt a reprice. Now we have the opportunity to look at this and make this, shinier, basically, so that when they come and look under the hood, this is validated by the high end of the multiple range that we offered you. It's not just the financials, which we were obviously building, that purchase price based on, but it's also all the other things that buyers care about. The people, the processes. Is this a truly transferable asset that they can jump in, run, and grow? So another big thing we work a lot on is, most owners think they're always going to say the business doesn't depend on me. But there's often a lot of opportunities there to continue to reduce owner dependence, so that, again, that buyer sees this is a true transferable asset. I can jump in and run and grow.
So when you're looking at it, and I imagine there's a couple, let's call them come to Jesus discussions, where you have to tell the owner that, look, revenue is too dependent on you as a person. On one side of the spectrum, that's sort of like if you're the head of a law firm and business comes because they think you're a good lawyer, that doesn't necessarily work in transferring it to a business because you want the recurring revenue to come from somewhere else. That's one issue, which I'm sure you have to sort of sit somebody down and say, look, we need to, and this is where the 5 years is helpful to say, we need to build in a bit of a succession plan, not just in terms of a sale, but in terms of an operation standpoint, so that things run in case you weren't going to be there and that value still sort of sits there correctly. The second part that I find interesting, and I've seen examples of this, is where you sit somebody down and say, you know what, this would look a lot better if you took less money out of the business for yourself. And we're able to sort of put that back down to EBITDA, so that, when the buyer comes in and they start using the shorthand of multiples on EBITDA or, revenue or net income or whatever, that multiple is, you're multiplying it times something bigger as opposed to somebody taking more money out to buy a boat or something like that. Do you get involved in that discussion to sort of say, where are things going and how do we get this balance sheet to a place where the multiple can be multiplied against something bigger?
Yeah, we do. And we take like kind of the cursory review, right, of that. And we can see that really quickly. And then we bring in, if we need, like, okay, do we need to shore up some of these, again, the accounting side of it, how the money flows through the business to affect both bottom line, to create that story, right? Every buyer wants 3 years financials minimum. We want that growth story to look strong. Let's start creating that now. And where are there opportunities to do that? And then if we need to bring in, is it a fractional controller, a fractional CFO, depending on kind of the size of the business, what they need and the sophistication they need to get those things in place, that's something we pull in instantly. Back to your first part of the question, is something we actually help them execute on. We have an architect client right now who's at that exact phase. So he has a right-hand woman architect that's been with him for over 10 years. He wants her to have the opportunity to step into the business. He also has a young architect son that he wants the opportunity for him to step into the business as well. So we're creating this succession plan for him. And one of the first problems we addressed was he's driving still almost all of the top line revenue. So almost all the business development is coming through him. So we're asking, okay, when does this right-hand woman get involved in the sales process? What percentage of meetings is she in? What is she bringing in herself? We're thinking a lot about that process now because his timeline is more 5 to 7 years. We have some time to build this out, to continue to train her, to continue to kind of up-level her, as well as other people in the business that can drive those relationships and hopefully continue that revenue process, that revenue flow, the recurring revenue that occurs from these major referral partners and developers that are giving him, those large contracts. So working with him right now specifically on what that looks like, both for, okay, what's our equity plan? How do we incentivize her to continue to be aligned with the goals of the business so that she really wants to take ownership, both literally and figuratively, right? So we're building an equity incentive plan with her. And then also we're like, okay, on the process side and the sales side, how do we continue to put things in place? So we're helping him set goals that she's in a certain percentage of meetings by the end of the year. We want her driving a certain percentage of revenue. We're setting those goals. We're helping them. And then we're also helping him make a plan to execute on those goals.
That's in addition to the idea of 5 to even longer out, that there is an exit or if it's an architect, maybe selling the practice to a larger architectural firm or something, maybe a private equity backed something or other somewhere down the line.
Exactly. And then this one is, right, that's a little bit longer middle timeline, but all of that makes it more, more efficient and effective in operations and more attractive as a potential sale for those two individuals that take it over in a succession plan from him.
What happens when a business comes to you and maybe the brand is well respected and the business looks good by outward appearances, but there is decay underneath, and they come to you and say, you know what, I'm ready to sell. And you go, well, there's selling and then there's, giving up. And maybe it's not as drastic as that, but maybe it's something where the dollars in their eyes are based on something that existed a long time ago and has been left into disrepair now. What do you do when you get stuck in that situation?
Yeah, we start with what we call an exit readiness assessment, which is like jumping in. It's a 90-minute virtual session. And it's a process that kind of pulls you out of your inbox, pulls you out of all those fires you're fighting, and really allows you to kind of look at all the prongs of what a buyer is going to look at in your business to assess its readiness for sale. And then it gives you a readiness score. So it will put into this questionnaire and a little bit of vision and values work we do as well. And it will say, okay, it tranches into 3 tranches. Everything about your business that a buyer is going to assess. And it's going to say, here's value adds. So that means greater multiple. Value detractors, okay, reduction in multiple on sale price. Or deal killers, like you mentioned accounting, legal, right? Certain large systematic things that maybe a buyer sees and literally not only just reprices the deal, but walks away because it's such a high risk or such a mess. So we do that assessment. That's kind of the first step that we do with our with our clients. And it gives that readiness score in that report and kind of tranches each of those things into those 3 buckets. And then those 3 buckets kind of help us start to build a roadmap of what are the most important things and in what order do we have to do these things, right? So again, the triage, I like to call it triage. We all have limited time, energy, and capital. How do we apply those limited time, energy, and capital, to assess and hopefully get to a place where we get to we're more ready to jump into the market and feel good about whatever that deal looks like. So really, yes, it's about having coming to Jesus moment. It's also about getting clear with the owner on where's their headspace. Like, if this is a situation, Alex, I'm burned out, take my freaking keys, sell the business.
Right.
Okay. Obviously, we want to avoid that at all costs. And like we've already spoken about, when you're proactive in that scenario versus reactive, if you get to this point where you're ready to go to the next thing, you're ready to move forward in whatever your life is going to bring, you now have done the work, hopefully, with someone like yourself, someone like me and Ripple's Edge, of like, we have those systems and people and processes in place. And now that I'm burned out, I'm ready to actually go to market. And that readiness score is a lot higher. But if you haven't done that work, it's a little harder. It does have to be, a conversation about what do you want out of this? What are your goals? And getting really clear on what we're able to do in what period of time to hopefully reach those goals.
So do you get involved with, say somebody is looking to grow and they want outside capital for it, but they want to stay involved. They want to grow the business. How do you think about that in terms of sourcing the capital and making sure that the people who come in are appropriate partners and all the brain damage that goes with that process?
Yeah, absolutely. We have several clients right now that are raising seed rounds. And then we have one that's doing the debate between, does he raise a Series A or not? And I think that discussion and that thought process has to be framed, at least in one way, phrased with the exit lens. And I think so many folks right now, especially if you have AI or you're in an industry where investment capital is flowing, I think there's so much pressure to raise the big Series A, right? Make the big splashy LinkedIn post about your oversubscribed round. Great. I'm all for that if we actually need that capital. There's a lot of things to consider, just like you said. Are these the right partners? If we go and raise this additional round, what types of limitations and sometimes handcuffs are being put on us for what our exit pathway looks like? This one client I'm speaking about has a really nice business. It's growing at a nice clip. It's clearly, I think it could exit for somewhere in the $20 million range in the next year or two. He's still the primary owner. He's feeling a lot of pressure from the industry he's in. The norm is to go raise a big, splashy Series A. I asked him, what does he want to be doing in 2 years? His answer was surfing in Portugal. If we go raise a Series A right now, which there's nothing wrong with that, you're not going to be surfing in Portugal in 2 years.
Right.
So with that in mind, are we ready to buckle? Is this the business you want to grow? Is this the business we want to bring in, again, people that are making decisions that deeply impact what you sell for and how long from now you sell? So that timeline gets extended. Those decision makers get brought in and that have influence on how we sell and who we sell to and for how much. So really just kind of being thoughtful about that. And look, maybe it is a Series A because he needs to, grow the business and use that capital to grow the business. Okay, but we think about, does it have to be a $50, $100 million round, or can it just be a $10 million round, right? Like thinking even about the size and how that affects the cap table, the decision making, and then the exit plan.
Have you had the difficult situation where somebody is presented with an opportunity? Let's say it's a lot of cash and the other currency is the stock in another company. And you look at it and you say, I don't know what I think about that. Maybe you should go all cash. Maybe you should walk away. And the pressures are obviously different as it gets more personal and someone is, selling their life's work and, they need the money maybe. They need or want the cash. the currency of the stock that they'd be receiving might not be anything that they're interested in. How do you have that difficult discussion?
Yeah, that's something I'm very comfortable in speaking to. And I will say, first and foremost, my advice almost always is get as much cash at close as possible. So we reduce that earnout tranche, right? So a lot of deals will have, let's say we're coming in and selling our company for $40 million. Obviously that's not a $40 million wire at closing. That's going to be tranched in usually 3 buckets: cash, earnout, and then, as you're speaking of, rollover equity in the buyer. I've seen deals that I've closed, and 5 years later, that rollover equity is 0. So just really thinking about, okay, if you don't hit your earnouts, if that rollover equity value is 0, is this cash tranche, are you completely comfortable with walking away with just this and no other money? If that feels okay to you, okay, cool. Then we can dial those different, again, the rollover equity and the earnout numbers however we need. But I do walk every owner through that exercise of, if these both go to 0, are you going to be okay psychologically, financially, whatever? And if not, then again, we need to think about, is this maybe a situation where we need to go grow more? Is this something where we need to negotiate different terms? Is this something where maybe you have 2 or 3 LOIs on the table and they have different structures, different tranches of where that rollover equity, what percentage of that purchase price is rollover equity? Those are all considerations that I think are really important. And often, especially if you're going to sell to an institutional buyer, they're always going to sell you, we're going to 10x this. That rollover equity is going to be 10x.
Oh, it's going to be amazing.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes. And I just gently remind them that, and I prepare, as the lawyer, I was having to do that at the 11th hour when we're already in the thick of the deal, right? They've already committed it to, it's almost too late for me to be advising them on that.
Sure.
But now that I get to work with owners before that process, I get to remember, rollover equity, we're going to keep in our mind as always, if that goes to 0. And if it doesn't, it's all just cherry on top. Incredible, great. But, especially with these institutional buyers that have this sophistication and are great salespeople, they're always going to tell you that this is going to be such a juicy, second bite of the apple, right? Like that second bite of the apple is going to be the 10x. And you hear it all the time. And just getting owners earlier ready for that. And I think hearing that through a different lens, as opposed to kind of that juicy sales pitch that you're going to get from the buyer.
Are you part of the process of ginning up buyers? I imagine it's in some ways very industry specific. There are people who understand the industry, they understand who the players are. And so those are the thoughtful checks that get written. But when you're advising a buyer, do they come to you to automatically be an expert in each different role, or do you delegate that out? How do you get a few LOIs on the table so that it's not a fire sale in some ways?
Yeah, totally. We consciously made the decision not to be brokers. So we didn't become a registered broker dealer for 2 reasons. One, I want to be able, if I'm building with an owner and let's say they come to me and they're a little burned out and they're like, I want to sell in a year. And then we start working, this happened. We started working with a woman and we started up-leveling her people and her processes. And a year, 18 months after working with us, she was like, wait, I actually have more freedom. I am operating at a higher level because the business is actually starting to run without me, which we were doing in preparation for sale. It also just makes it more joyful to run. Like she gets to go back to the parts of her business she's running and enjoying doing. And then she says, you know what? I want to grow up for another year or 2. Okay, great. We now, because our compensation is not locked up in a success fee or a sale fee, we're not pushing her towards that sale at that time. Now we can say, okay, let's continue to grow and continue to, think about exit another year or 2 down the line. So that's one reason why we made the choice not to do that. And 2, exactly what you said. They're often very industry specific, right? A broker or an investment banker are going to know an industry really well. Let's say you're a manufacturer of a certain size. We're going to be able to refer you to a banker or broker that actually knows your industry well. And then we're going to give you a referral to multiple of them and make sure it's a good fit for you because this process is a marathon, not a sprint. Once we go to market, it can be very arduous. You want someone on your team that you trust, that you fit well with. So we'll not only make those recommendations or intros for you, but then we'll help assess fit. And because obviously I'm trained in looking at those contracts, I'll help you kind of assess pay structure and what you're really agreeing to in that new relationship of those people that are going to go take you to market, right? They've done that awesome work to go build those manufacturing relationships that are going to hopefully create multiple LOIs and an auction and drive up price, and also really drive up, again, give you more options so that you don't feel pigeonholed into a deal, right? If we only get one LOI and now hopefully we're getting multiple and you're getting to assess more than just purchase price. I'm going to be the one on your shoulder always that's going to be like, fit matters and trust your gut. And if this team doesn't feel like, or this new owner doesn't feel like a good fit, honor that and let's figure that out before we get to the closing table.
How do you tell a founder or a family-owned business that the board dynamics, or more specifically the family dynamics, are a valued detractor? If there's conflict, or if there's someone in there who is really looking for income where other parts of the family are looking to grow, and they're at loggerheads and each decision is a total fight and no one's happy. And I imagine ultimately that projects out to the buying community and they're like, I don't want to deal with this. How do you split the hairs on that one?
Yeah, I think it's a nice mix of human first and foremost, like understanding the humans behind the business, understanding the dynamics behind the business. I think there's a lot of professionals in the M&A space that have no desire to get into that. Me and my co-founder, Kim Wasney, we both like that part. We like knowing the people. We like knowing the humans. We like understanding the dynamics. We like understanding, hi, I have a block on this part of my business because I have this fear mindset related to X. Or I have pressure from the family member who's telling me I should be, our goals should be this direction and I want our goals to be the other direction. I think just being willing to dig into that and listen and be, a third-party neutral advisor that really at the end of the day is working for the owners and the founders first, and thinking about that holistically from the human first mindset. And then process-wise, again, just coming in and making sure, okay, if there is that person, if let's say maybe there are 4 siblings that own a business that was, second generation now, and 3 are like, no, we want to grow. And the 4th is like, no, we want to sell. Okay, how do we show that person, communicate to that 4th person, put a little processes, a little bit more understanding around them for them to understand that's not the right time to do this right now because of XYZ, or the company isn't ready because of ABC. So giving them, I think, just more information, education, understanding, and then if needed, wrap them in some more process to neutralize that impact on the company so that the buyer can come in and see, hey, this singular human that may not be on the same page is not nearly as much of a risk because of these processes and procedures we have around them.
I guess I would just say, don't give the buyer a reason to say no or to pay less. If you can batten that down ahead of time, it's worth it. As we wind down here, people who are thinking about selling, what are the first steps they should take to analyze their readiness for it?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it's never too early to start thinking about it. Because even just getting clear, again, a little bit on vision and values of what you want out of this really helps direct some of those major business decisions as you grow. So we have 2 clients right now that are considering joint ventures. One might actually go the joint venture route and get into business bed with a new 50% partner. And one has actually decided against that path, right? And they're both on very different exit timelines. One has more of a 2 to 3 year exit timeline. The other one is probably a little longer term. So really, again, I think thinking about, and from my perspective, their different exit pathways are large drivers of why a joint venture may or may not be the right choice for them. So that's just an example. I gave the example also of raising capital. So I think having that, walking through some of those processes, and I'm always happy to just talk to folks about this, to talk to business owners and founders about how they're thinking about it, even just being a sounding board, even, without an engagement, without hiring us, like, I want more owners to be thinking about this earlier. It only does them a massive service to themselves, being more ready, being more thoughtful, and hopefully finding that better fit. So I would say just even the thought exercise is a worthwhile exercise. Another one I say is a really fun owner dependence test is, okay, I'm going to go to Europe for 3 weeks. Let's say I'm in a place of Europe that gets no cell phone reception. If I go through this exercise and I know I am not available, who's going to call me first? What processes are going to break? What bottlenecks are going to happen? What's going to sit in my inbox and not get done because I'm not there? It's a nice and more fun owner dependence test than if I had stepped outside and got hit by a bus tomorrow,
Right.
which is a little darker. But the Europe test, we love saying that because it helps us try to assess some of those early parts of where we're still really, business is really dependent on us. And that's a nice process to go through to try to help you kind of uncover some of those things where we can reduce that owner dependence.
Terrific stuff. Alex, how do people find you and your firm?
Yes, I'm Alexandria Seydel. Last name is Seydel. And you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm there all the time. Ripple's Edge Advisors. Reach out via email, reach out via LinkedIn message. Always here to just have a conversation and be a resource, even if you're just like, I'm just thinking about it. Like, love to have the conversation and chat through it with you.
Terrific. That will all be in the show notes. Thank you for being on.
Thank you, Frazer.